Chapter 12, Disorder, a Partisan of Order by Victor Hugo from the book Les Miserables. Bossuet muttered in Comefera's ear. He did not answer my question. He is a man who does good by gunshots, said Comefera. Those who have preserved some memory of this already distant epoch know that the National Guard from the suburbs was valiant against insurrections. It was particularly zealous and intrepid in the days of June, 1832, a certain good dram-shop keeper of Pantin des Vertus or La Canette, whose establishment had been closed by the riots, became leonine at the sight of his deserted dance-hall, and got himself killed to preserve the order represented by a tea garden. In that bourgeois and heroic time, in the presence of ideas which had their knights, interests had their paladins, the prosiness of the originators detracted nothing from the bravery of the movement. The diminution of a pile of crowns made bankers sing the Marseillaise. They shed their blood lyrically for the counting-house, and they defended the shop, that immense diminutive of the fatherland, with laced Ammonian enthusiasm. At bottom, we will observe, there was nothing in all this that was not extremely serious. It was social elements entering into strife, while awaiting the day when they should enter into equilibrium. Another sign of the times was the anarchy mingled with governmentalism, the barbarous name of the correct party. People were for order in combination with lack of discipline. The drum suddenly beat capricious calls at the command of such or such a colonel of the National Guard. Such and such a captain went into action through inspiration. Such and such National Guardsmen fought, for an idea, and on their own account. At critical moments on days they took counsel less of their leaders than of their instincts. There existed in the army of order veritable guerrilleros, some of the sword like Fannicot, others of the pen like Henry Fonfred. Civilization, unfortunately, represented at this epoch rather by an aggregation of interests than by a group of principles, was or thought itself in peril. It set up the cry of alarm. Each, constituting himself a centre, defended it, succoured it, and protected it with his own head, and the first comer took it upon himself to save society. Zeal sometimes proceeded to extermination. A platoon of the National Guard would constitute itself on its own authority a private council of war, and judge and execute a captured insurgent in 5 minutes. It was an improvisation of this sort that had slain Jean Prouvaire. Fierce lynch law, with which no one party had any right to reproach the rest, for it has been applied by the Republic in America, as well as by the monarchy in Europe. This lynch law was complicated with mistakes. On one day of rioting, a young poet named Paul-Aimé Garnier was pursued in the Place Royale, with a bayonet at his loins, and only escaped by taking refuge under the porte-cochere of No. 6. They shouted, "There's another of those Saint-Simonians," and they wanted to kill him. Now he had under his arm a volume of the memoirs of the Duc de Saint-Simon. A National Guard had read the words Saint Simon on the book and had shouted, "Death!" On the 6th of June, 1832, a company of the National Guards from the suburbs, commanded by the Captain Fannicot above mentioned, had itself decimated in the Rue de la Chanvrerie out of caprice, and its own good pleasure. This fact, singular though it may seem, was proved at the judicial investigation opened in consequence of the insurrection of 1832. Captain Fannicot, a bold and impatient bourgeois, a sort of condottieri of the order of those whom we have just characterized, a fanatical and intractable governmentalist, could not resist the temptation to fire prematurely, and the ambition of capturing the barricade alone and unaided, that is to say with his company. Exasperated by the successive apparition of the red flag and the old coat which he took for the black flag, he loudly blamed the generals and chiefs of the corps, who were holding council, and did not think that the moment for the decisive assault had arrived, and who were allowing the insurrection to fry in its own fat, to use the celebrated expression of one of them. For his part, he thought the barricade ripe, and as that which is ripe ought to fall, he made the attempt. He commanded men as resolute as himself, raging fellows, as a witness said. His company, the same which had shot Jean Prouvaire the poet, was the first of the battalion posted at the angle of the street. At the moment when they were least expecting it, the captain launched his men against the barricade. This movement, executed with more goodwill than strategy, cost the Fannicot company dear. Before it had traversed 2/3 of the street, it was received by a general discharge from the barricade. 4, the most audacious, who were running on in front, were mown down point-blank at the very foot of the redoubt. And this courageous throng of National Guards, very brave men but lacking in military tenacity, were forced to fall back after some hesitation, leaving 15 corpses on the pavement. This momentary hesitation gave the insurgents time to reload their weapons, and a second and very destructive discharge struck the company before it could regain the corner of the street, its shelter. A moment more and it was caught between two fires, and it received the volley from the battery piece which, not having received the order, had not discontinued its firing. The intrepid and imprudent Fannicot was one of the dead from this grape shot. He was killed by the cannon, that is to say, by order. This attack, which was more furious than serious, irritated Enjolras. "The fools," said he, "they are getting their own men killed and they are using up our ammunition for nothing." Enjolras spoke like the real general of insurrection, which he was. Insurrection and repression do not fight with equal weapons. Insurrection, which is speedily exhausted, has only a certain number of shots to fire and a certain number of combatants to expend. An empty cartridge box, a man killed, cannot be replaced. As repression has the army, it does not count its men, and, as it has Vincennes, it does not count its shots. Repression has as many regiments as the barricade has men, and as many arsenals as the barricade has cartridge boxes. Thus they are struggles of 1 against 100, which always end in crushing the barricade, unless the revolution, uprising suddenly, flings into the balance its flaming archangel's sword. This does happen sometimes, then everything rises, the pavements begin to seethe, popular redoubts abound. Paris quivers supremely, the quid divinum is given forth, a 10th of August is in the air, a 29th of July is in the air, a wonderful light appears, the yawning moor force draws back, and the army that lion sees before it erect and tranquil that prophet France.